Now, throughout my career, I've come across 3 different performance management systems that I personally dealt with. The one I like by far is SAP Success Factors. The reason why I like SAP Success Factors is because I felt it's the most comprehensive one. So I'm not sure if this was a customized version to us, but I think it's pretty much a vanilla. It comes with the system as is. They have all these behavioral competency places, all these places where you can put certain things that you do throughout the year, and then you can turn them into achievements and then put them as part of your objectives to complement your objectives or your goals, actually. And the way it's designed, it takes into consideration a lot of things. It takes into consideration any counseling, any coaching that you've had throughout the year, all the performance conversations, you can capture them, you can have feedback. So if you want to be fair and have a look by end of the year on everything, it's a great tool to capture everything that's been happening with your team. So by far, I prefer Success Factors in terms of performance management as a system. Other systems weren't so bad, but they were not as sophisticated and as future-proof in terms of what to include in performance management and what not to include. So it was very good, and I'll try in the future to get you a glimpse of the system. I'll try to get in touch with the SAP guys to have a demo and maybe demonstrate how that works for you. So again, choosing a system that is good for your performance culture is very important, because if you have the best performance culture but your system doesn't really help, it doesn't make any sense. Because even if you have the good culture, you need to have backup. You need to have records of how you're assessing this performance for your own records, for auditing purposes, and all these things. So again, a system is critical. Make sure that whatever system you choose, even if it's your own design system, make sure it serves the purpose. Again, think about validity and reliability. Now we come to a very interesting part of this topic. How do you conduct performance appraisals? How do you conduct these meetings? When you sit down the one-to-one, it's very crucial the way you conduct them, because our brains function in a certain way. And here I want to mention something very interesting that I've gone through with David Drock. He's one of the founders of the Neuro Leadership Institute. And back in January 2016, I believe, he shared with us during the HRPA conference in Toronto that they had a study done to see how people feel before they go into performance management conversation, or feedback in general, actually, with their line managers. And it turns out, actually, the anxiety that builds up is equivalent to an anxiety of survival instinct. Like, it's as if you're seeing a bear in the jungle. Think along these lines. That was very powerful and insightful, because imagine just by being there, you yourself as the manager, no matter how good you are, when you're talking about someone's performance, this is the kind of impact you would have on them. Right? It's like going into an encounter with a bear in the jungle. So keeping that in mind, you need to be very careful how you position these conversations. If you heard of something called the amygdala, this is the part of your brain that is responsible for survival instinct. These are the instantaneous things you do, like when you put your finger on something hot and then suddenly you just remove it. Don't think about that. This is your amygdala at work. And believe it or not, performance management meetings, they trigger the amygdala, my friends. Yes. And one of the advices David Drock gave us back then, he said, if you take Panadol, you'll feel better before a performance conversation. So take Panadol or Tylenol, whatever your painkiller is, because it causes as much social pain as actual pain. Believe this. This is, again, a study, research, a proper research that is validated. So this is how powerful these situations are. So you need to be very careful. My favorite way of conducting a performance management review with someone is to actually facilitate it. Ease the way, be smooth. Start the conversation with something positive, a general overview. Focus on the highlights, what worked. Regardless of how the year passed for your organization, focus on the individual. This is about this particular individual. Say something along the lines like, I believe we had a very good year this year, or a good year because of so-and-so, and overall your performance was so-and-so, and I want you to think along the lines of what can be improved, what are the good things that you've done, and this is how we will carry on this conversation. So something along these lines, just ease it in and be mindful of your body language. Like, I know that we're very susceptible to biases and other things. So your perception of that particular individual can be very visible in your body language. Check this out. Let's say X person walks into your office. They know that they're coming to have their one-to-one end of year discussion. You go something. Hey, how are you? Have a seat. So I see that, yeah, how do you think this year went? What is the impression you're making if you're speaking like that? This sarcasm, this fake smile, sarcastic smile, or something like, hi, you can have a seat. So tell me, what do you think went well this year? Again, what message are you sending? Your nonverbal cues are very important. Your body language is very important, so be mindful of that. So, bottom line, ease the conversation. This is about them. What you want them to do is kind of like an introspection, like for them to come to you and tell you what they think they've done well, how they're feeling about their performance, what worked, what didn't work, and have them prepared before they come to you. Set the expectations. Don't just go out of the blue and call someone into your office and say, this is your performance appraisal. No, give them, some headroom. Tell them, I'm going to meet you that day, and do it yourself. It's very important that you set it yourself. Don't get your secretary or your office manager or a PA or whoever to set it for you, because it means a lot. This is a very personal conversation, and it's a career conversation. So you'd want to be as approachable and as open as you can with your people when you're having these conversations. So book it yourself, give some guidelines to the conversation, explain how it will work, set the expectations so that when people come to you, it eases the amygdala a bit. You don't want to be speaking to an amygdala when you're sitting there. And yeah, it just makes it smoother for you, both of you actually. One of the key things you want to do in a performance conversation is establish the facts and agree to them, both of you. Because when you talk about facts, there's little wiggle room for emotions to kick in. So even if your appraisee is coming to this conversation with butterflies and rosy fields and they're not really there, once you establish some facts that they cannot deny, then you kind of set the tone. It is a bit disappointing to them, obviously, but at least you set you set the tone fairly, and they cannot argue that, oh no, this happened and this didn't happen, because you have it captured. So give relevant, pointed, specific feedback. Don't leave any room for misinterpretation or guessing. This is the last thing you want to have, because you want that person to walk away from the meeting on the same page as you are, so that you avoid any unlikely surprises in the future that might stain your relationship. So again, be very clear and very transparent during this conversation, and don't leave things for interpretation. That's very important. And to keep yourself on track, it's always good to remember What is your objective of this conversation? Again, you guys are working on the same team. You're part of the same company. You want what's best for your people so that they can do what's best for you, which is aligning themselves with the organization's objectives and doing their best. So don't turn this into a cockfight where you throw in accusations and you get a defense back from people. You want to be on the same team. You want to be seen as a unity. And this is a great bonding opportunity with your team members, because if you show them the right amount of respect and fairness in this conversation, that will stick in their head. And they'll know that you're a fair person, you're not easygoing, but you're not also a horrible boss. You're someone fair in the middle, and if you need to call them out on something, you will. And if you will compliment them, you will. Speaking of which, it's very important to celebrate their achievements. So I cannot emphasize this enough. We're very passionate as humans, usually, unless your character is different. But most of us are very happy pointing out what has gone wrong. And we're very passionate and vocal about it. Even if it's out of good intentions, even if you want that person to feel like, hey, listen, I know you can do better than this. But a lot of that can be discouraging. And you might miss out on the positive traits, the positive things that have happened. So again, make sure that you celebrate those as passionately as you're celebrating, as passionately as you're mentioning the points that need to be improved. So celebrate these successes. Be as passionate as you are. Give them a good pat on the shoulder. They deserve it. They've done something good. Why not celebrate it? So again, this is very important. Balance things out. Don't let the meeting be monotonous and just focused on the negative and even if it's not negative, even if it's very constructive. But again, it will be discouraging. It will drain them out. So you want to celebrate what good has happened as well. So keep that in mind. One other thing you need to be mindful of is your leadership style, because you don't want one leadership style, which is your preference, to rule the conversation. This is, remember, the moment you want them to talk about themselves, the moment you want to bring awareness from within. It's very much like a coaching conversation. This is when you shine as a coach and as a mentor. So be very careful how you say things. Be very careful, what is that person's preference? How can I get the best out of this person during this meeting? Not what is my preferred style and this is how I want to speak to them. It's your job as a leader to adapt and be vulnerable during this meeting. Because if you're like forcing them down and you're the upper hand and they feel it, it's not going to be very productive. Be vulnerable, be down to earth. I'm not saying be nice and don't say the stuff that you need to say. No, you need to be very vocal about the things that need to improve. But again, be very careful and mindful of your management style, your leadership style, and how it's manifesting itself in that meeting. And if you know that you could be a dictator, yeah, that's not the meeting to be a dictator in, because what you'll do is that you'll stir all the negative emotions in that person and you'll lose them. They'll be disengaged, they'll lose interest. So again, be mindful of your leadership style. You want to be open, you want to follow their preference, not yours. Remember, this is about them, not you, and it's about their performance, not personal between you and them. And your job is to try and help them to improve if they have something to improve on. We all have. And not to grill them down and drill them down, and grill them and tell them that they've been horrible people. Then you're the bad manager and you're not the right person to do these conversations. And if your mood is affected, by all means, cancel a meeting. Don't have that meeting. It's always better to cancel that meeting than have a bad performance review. I've been part of this with some very senior leaders, and I don't want to tell the adverse effect this had on me personally. I'm one of the people that own what they do to the maximum they can. But the discouragement and the disengagement I felt because of this particular meeting, it led me to do things. I made some of my life changing decisions because of this one meeting. So again, be mindful of the fact that people are people, and in such meetings they're vulnerable, so you don't want to come across as somebody over the top and telling them off. Very important. Otherwise you might lose them, you might disengage them. So your leadership style, be mindful of your own pitfalls. And there's the good old feedback sandwich, a technique a lot of people like to use. Like if I have bad stuff I want to say, I'll squeeze them in the middle, I'll give you a good layer on top, a good layer on the bottom, so that you don't leave me with a bad impression. I'm not a big fan of the feedback sandwich if it's planned. What do I mean if it's planned? If it's planned and staged and it sounds fake and disingenuous. Because people are not dumb, they can pick up on these things. So if it sounds like, oh yeah, here's layer 1, take layer 2, and here's layer 3, now off you go, doesn't feel good. Now, I've given feedback sandwiches to people before, but they came across as very genuine because that was the flow of the conversation. We were going through the conversation from the good to the things that they need to improve, and then something came along the way, naturally came along the way, and there was a good opportunity to say, hey, but this was great as well. So if it comes in naturally, yes, by all means, but don't overdo it. Don't just make it feel so staged and fake. And remember that your performance appraisal conversation is not a conversation for you to settle the score. The score should have been being settled on an ongoing basis throughout the year. This is merely just for you to wrap up that particular year, link it to what's going to happen in the new year, and start a new conversation, new flow of conversations. So again, it's a link and it's a nice wrap up. It's not settling the scores. You have the whole year to do that. It's not the time to do that in a one-off meeting. Now, one other important thing when it comes to the post-feedback session. One thing you need to be very careful during the session, the last few bits. Do not overpromise and underdeliver. That can be very dangerous. It will put a question mark on your credibility as a reliable manager. It will put a question mark on the organization. So don't set expectations that you're not sure you can honor unless you have something at hand, unless you're 150% sure that this will happen, i.e. you are the decision maker, then don't promise. Things like promising promotions to people or certain increases, I've done that, we're all guilty of that. They don't turn out well. So before you have a paper in your hand that says it's signed by your CEO or whatever, do not make such promises. This is very important and puts a question mark on your credibility and puts the person down. They'll just lose motivation. They'll be in a place where you don't want them to be. So be mindful of that. And last but not least, remember that these conversations, no matter how emotional they get, no matter how vocal you want to be about them, they're confidential. You need to respect that confidentiality, so unless it's someone who has a say in the review, you don't share any of what happened throughout the review with someone. I've had an employee coming to me at one time. They were completely obsessed with their manager because they had shared some of the feedback from their review with someone else. Now, mind you, there is a double standard to that. And the double standard is that sometimes people do share these conversations. Like somebody who's not really happy with their review, they would go to their colleagues and they would say, hey, this man told me so and so, and I don't believe this. However, this is their decision, and you need to respect that. I mean, they shouldn't, obviously, because these things are confidential. But sometimes if they choose, hey, that's their choice to share. But you, as the manager, you should not fall into this trap. You should not tell anyone from your colleagues, other supervisors, more senior people, unless they have something to do with it. So keep that in mind. Now, as a result of your performance evaluation interview, you might want to put someone on a PIP, or what we call a performance improvement plan. If there are things they need to improve in their performance, they're not performing up to the standard you want. When you do that, make sure that your PIP is smart. And when I say smart, I mean like smart, and I mean also specific, measurable, achievable or attainable, relevant, and time-bound. This is very important because you want to be as clear as you can be in the performance, in the post-performance stage, to set the right expectations and to monitor performance in the way that you want. Don't leave anything for guessing. Again, be very clear. It's their right to know what the expectations are, and you owe them to be as clear as possible with them. This way, there will be no surprises when you do your evaluation, the post-evaluation. When you set time frames, make sure that you're keeping an eye throughout. So help out. Don't be just, okay, here you go, here's your PIP and deal with it. If they need support, it's your role to give them support. So remember, your objective, if they're good, and mostly they're good people, they want to achieve, you want them to achieve. You need to help them to achieve. There might be some obstacles. You are there to facilitate things for them. And one key question you need to ask is, how can I help you? Is there anything hindering you? Can I support you in any way, shape, or form? This is something you have to ask. Don't wait for them to ask you. Always encourage them to come to you and ask for help. If it's something reasonable, something within your authority, then you should. If it's something with someone else, then facilitate the conversation or link them with that someone, connect them so that they can take this forward. But be there to support. This is very important. Now, after you finish the plan, or you've gone through and it's time for the final evaluation of the plan, you'll come to a decision tree. Maybe the person tried their best, they gave it all they can, they couldn't get up to the level that you require. Now here's a decision for you to make. Is that something you can tolerate, just for the sake of the goodwill they've shown, and can you support them better? Can your organization tolerate that? If it's detrimental to the organization, it cannot happen, some decision needs to be made. But if it's not detrimental and you can help and you can support that person, then obviously this says a lot about your culture, and especially if their work is not really harming anyone, but they just need to pick things up. So again, it's really your call, whether to continue and extend the timelines or to pull the plug. So this is one point. Another thing is that if they're not performing and they're not taking it seriously, then you might just want to pull the plug, have the conversation and pull the plug, knowing that you've done everything you can to support and they're not doing what they should do in order to move on. That's another decision you need to make. Now, if they perform up to the standard, they picked up the performance, they became good people, they're performing like their colleagues. Good performers, not good people, everyone is a good person. But what do you do then? Do you just leave them be? I don't think that's the right approach. It's always healthy to keep an eye, keep monitoring from a distance, not to annoy them or anything, or to make them go why is this man still behind my case? But just to kind of give them a push every now and then if you notice some lag or some delay in things, just to be there, just to keep them engaged, keep them on their game. Hopefully that will help them. Now, what if they move from that to becoming exceptional performers? And that does happen. It happened to us once. There was this guy, he was one of our frontliners, and he's done everything wrong by the book, and we were that close to dismissing him. In our last conversation, I had a heart-to-heart conversation with him, and I told him, listen, you need to understand this is going to be the final warning for you. If you don't make it, you will break it, you're gone. You lost your job. But I mean, that was a very lengthy conversation. I invested time in it because I believe that this person had what it takes, and he was just being misguided by his, I don't know, immaturity at the time. Now that person really took the feedback on. 6 months down the line, he had the Employee of the Month. Yeah. So we gave him Employee of the Month. That's how good people can get. The important thing is that you need to understand the person in front of you, try to make the most out of them. You're there to support and help people. That's one of your role as a supervisor or managers. This is one of your key roles, one of the most important ones, to bring out the best in people so that they can perform. Not to just go the easy way and, okay, let's dismiss and let's rehire. It's very inefficient. It's unfair to humans. It's unfair to the company because, again, you're paying for all the expenses, you're training someone, you're losing on productivity. You don't want to do that. So you want to be fair, you want to support people to get to perform up to the level they need to be on, and you want to be fair to the organization as well. So again, these are some of the things you might want to do after a performance conversation. And keeping track of things you do, be it on paper, be it through systems, whatever you can do, just make sure you're organized and you have all your facts together. And remember that these things are very important to be very objective because there is tendency to be subjective about them. There is tendency for biases to kick in. So you want to protect yourself, from your own biases, and you want to be fair to others, and you want to be fair to the organization, and you want to be legal. Because if things turn ugly and there's a lawsuit, you would want to look like you've done everything that you could before you made a decision to let someone go. So again, keep all of these in mind. That said, we reached the end of this video. I hope this was meaningful, this was beneficial to you. I hope if you're an HR department of one who just started, or if you're new to HR, or if you have your own business, you don't have an HR person to support you, I hope this was helpful. And on this topic, there's one important book that I want to recommend for you, a good read. This is one of the first books I bought when I first got into HR. It's quite old, actually. It's a 1998 book. It's called Powerful Performance Appraisals by Karen McCurchie. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. It's a very good book. It has amazing tips. They're still relevant to date. Some of the things have moved on, obviously. I don't know if there's a newer version of this, but I would highly recommend this book. If you do things on your own, it has tons of advices, great stuff. One of the things I like about this is here. So it talks about things like understanding motivation, what could that mean to people, how you can capitalize on that. It gives you the decision trees, what are some of the things you could do. It has a lot of good stuff. So this is a very nice, not expensive book. It's good to have. It's a very small book, so you can read it in one setting. I would highly recommend it if you're an HR department of one, or if you have your own business, you don't have a system in place, it would definitely help you. And remember, the system, if you can afford one, needs to be what you need it to be. It needs to be relevant to your needs. And if you choose to do your own thing with your own IT department, or you're a developer, a small developer, or even if you use Excel, if you use forms, there is different ways you can do things. You just need to make sure that it's relevant to you, it's relevant to your business, and it's fit for purpose. It does what it's supposed to do, which is giving you a good performance system, performance management system, and it serves creating this performance culture that you want to create in your business. And don't forget that performance appraisals are, again, and systems are one part of the equation. The other part is the ongoing feedback, from the day they join, setting the expectations, going through that whole performance journey, setting up the expectations, job expectations, behavior expectations, skills, quality, all of these things. Just remember, you want a good performance culture. You need to be very clear and very consistent how you deliver the message, and you need to propagate this. instill it in people, and hopefully you will have whatever you want, be it a good culture of performance, be it happy employees, engaged employees, be it good business results. All of these, they add to one another. That said, we've reached the end of this video. I hope this was beneficial. You enjoyed it. Again, the recommended reads. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel. I'll have more similar content in the future. It really helps. And in my next video, I will be talking about strategy and how to design your own HR strategy aligned with the business results for small, medium-sized organizations and HR departments of one. So stay tuned for that and see you next Saturday.